So you've heard the term brand voice tons of times in your tenure in business, but what does it really mean? In today's episode, we're going to be breaking brand voice into its component parts so you actually can understand what creates a unique brand voice. And we're also going to be looking at 3 different big businesses that have very distinct brand voices to give you some real world examples. So let's get straight into it. Welcome back to Emma Given's Content and Copy, both on YouTube and in the podcast version. So we talk about content marketing, copywriting, and entrepreneurship, and whichever format you prefer, audio or visual, you can find the links in the YouTube description or the podcast show notes connected to today's episode. So I am Emma. I'm the founder of Emma Given's Content and Copy, which is a copywriting and content marketing boutique based here in Toronto, Canada. But we serve brands all over the world, as long as they are premium service-based businesses or premium product-based businesses. So to give you a couple of examples of recent projects, we did one for a flower farm, which was amazing, both product and service, because they also have a wedding venue on site. We can work with boutique hotels, brand designers, OBMs, like online business managers, all sorts of different industries, with that main thing in common of having a really clear, distinct brand voice. So that's why in today's episode, we're going to go in detail as to what makes a brand voice. Essentially, your brand voice boils down to your unique brand's personality conveyed in writing or in speech, but we usually focus on writing, mixed and with a really strategic balance with the way of speaking that your ideal client has, ways of speaking that resonate with them. So it's like creating the lingua franca, or the common language, between an authentic voice that conveys your brand's vision, the value you put out there, and your own ethics as well. So that piece combined with the specific word choices, the anecdotes, the culture, etc. of your ideal client. So you find where it overlaps so that you can create a really unique brand voice that feels super sincere and also really results oriented and really effective at creating a response in your ideal audience. So what are some of the components of brand voice? The first is tone. So tone can be things like appreciative, serious, academic. And of course, there are smaller components that add up to tone. So how do you show appreciation? You probably use words like I appreciate or thank you, or it meant a lot to me to see this. So it is word choice. It's the connotations of words as well. Very positive words. For example, maybe you don't want to sound super serious. So rather than calling something difficult, you might choose to use the phrase not easy. Of course, they basically mean the same thing, but the feeling of the tone of the overall sentence is much, much different when you say, this was a really difficult situation, or you say, this situation wasn't easy, but we managed to find a solution. For example, if you have a lighthearted tone, you can probably use humor as well. And this is going to also lead us into the next point, the next component, which is cadence. If you have a very lighthearted, very young tone, for example, cadence will play a role in that just as much as word choices, for example, do. So cadence is essentially the pacing of a text. So how many words are in a sentence? Do you push it all the way to the boundary before it becomes a run-on sentence? Or do you have very basic, short, and choppy sentences? Do you use a mix? So, see, spot, run would be a very, very quick cadence. Whereas if you're going to be inspired by Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice, and you have this very flowery, adjective-filled, once upon a time, we were walking through a dark and blustery forest when we came upon, and it just keeps going on forever. The cadence is very different. The rhythm, the pace is different, and that can absolutely influence the tone. So the third point is around intentional grammar choices. And I'm going to tie that back into a tone example, so a youthful tone. When a young person especially is typing on their phone and sending messages to their friends, they're not worried about grammar rules. They're also probably using short forms. Emojis actually play a really meaningful role in the meaning that gets conveyed, and they're going to be using things like contractions. So instead of she was not, they're going to say she wasn't. Much more human in a sense. It's actually the way that we speak out loud, but someone young is absolutely writing the way that they speak as much as possible. So that is a really important point. Those grammar choices that you make, do you use emojis in your text? Do you, in your newsletter, include emojis to convey feeling, or does it feel really unprofessional to you because your audience is expecting, very traditional, broken up sentences, no contractions? Something of that tone is going to feel more academic, more, like I said, traditional, because you're not using emojis. That would be super, super weird in that environment. So all of it, I think overall, you can see ties back to tone. And there are so many different tones you can go with, but word choice, grammar choice, etc. all plays a role there. The fourth point I want to make is how you speak about yourself. So do you choose to describe to your audience yourself as I? Do you say we? Do you use terms like our business? Do you call yourself, if you're an individual, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a freelancer? The connotations are very different between those three words alone. A business owner, very different connotation. For example, in my experience, I think the word freelancer, because of the connotations it's taken on, because of things like Upwork and Fiverr, I find that they're not taken as seriously as someone who does the exact same work but chooses to refer to themselves as a business owner, for example. Very different perception. So you want to be very intentional about how you describe yourself, whether you use the first person singular, I, or the first person plural, we. The next point is how you address your audience. Do you say you, singular? Do you say you guys, depending on the part of North America you're from? Or perhaps you prefer to say things like folks to be more inclusive. Y'all is another example. And it would be super weird for me, someone from Toronto, to use y'all. But if you're from the southern US and it's genuinely how you speak to your audience, and your audience, especially if they're very concentrated in that area, absolutely embrace the term y'all. You just want to be intentional about that choice and be as consistent as possible. Next one, super easy. Do you use swear words? Yes or no? Or if it's somewhere in the middle, how do you decide when it is appropriate and when it's not appropriate to use swear words? If we're going to be talking about this specifically, I like to use an example that I learned in a grade 9 drama class, which is if you can justify how emotion is more honestly conveyed through a swear word in a certain scenario, then it's a good fit. If it feels gratuitous, like it's not really conveying something in a way that other words couldn't, then probably leave it out, omit it. And also think about your audience. If your audience has a ton of like preteen girls in it, and you also are speaking to their moms at the same time, probably don't use swear words because their moms aren't going to look super favorably on that. And the last component we're going to talk about in today's video is word grade level. That's the term I'll use. So some people, for their audience, are going to want to use very simple language, very simple word choices, and might be aiming for what a grade 3 would feel comfortable with. And there's a lot of benefit to speaking to your adult audience with the lowest grade level possible. Not to speak to them like they're dumb, not at all, but because it is a little easier to understand in general, and because also you don't risk losing things in translation, and especially if you're not serving a more advanced audience. So you'll see YouTube videos from time to time that are, explaining something like black holes to a kindergartner, a grade 3, a preteen, teenager, university level student. Those are all the different levels. And the way you talk to the university level student who has a background in physics is going to be very different from the way that you talk to the kindergartner, right? They have a different experience of the world. They have different baseline vocabulary to work off of. A physics university student compared to an English university student, like English is a major university student, they have different vocabulary levels and concepts. So you want to make sure you're speaking to their level of understanding. So that way you get the best results for both of you out of the situation. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in the comments below on YouTube if this grade level concept is something you're familiar with, or if you'd like any clarification on that, some examples perhaps. All right, we're going to look at 3 specific businesses to give us examples of brand voices in action. But I just want to underline all of this to say that none of these choices are necessarily wrong. So even though I have a very strong preference, for example, towards contractions, because it's the way that people speak, and I'm a copywriter, and generally across the board, that is the preference. That gets the best results. There are situations and audiences where even I, as that very biased copywriter, would not go with contractions. So you do want to make the right choices for your business and your audience, but there are no inherently good or bad choices when it comes to brand voice. They're the right choices for you and your audience. So the first business we're going to look at using their brand voice in action is Dollar Shave Club, which is reinventing in a very large sense the perception of shaving products, because oftentimes they're conveyed as something luxurious that either makes someone very masculine or very feminine. So I'm thinking of very masculine portrayals like with Gillette, and very feminine portrayals with Venus, the brand that's named after the goddess of love and beauty, right? So with Dollar Shave Club, they bring it very much more down to earth. They are also super, super humorous. And they focus a lot on being economical and being budget friendly. So if you look at the homepage as of the point that I'm recording this video, there is very light copy in a sense that there's just not very much text. And so it's focusing on all the different products that you get for $15. That's kind of the summary at the bottom of the homepage. You can get all of this for just $15. So very, very focused on value, highlighting only the most important benefits without a lot of text to frame it, and summarizing that like this is a huge selling point for us. The price is actually something that sells for our business. So I'm going to show you, or I'm going to tell you, read out loud, a little bit of copy for a specific product that I think demonstrates this really well. So right now on the homepage, you see the Post-Shave Dew, DEW, which my perception is that it's some sort of like very light moisturizer. So some of the copy: quick vanishing feather white moisturizer. There we go. Helps hydrate skin after shaving. There could not be a more simple sentence than that. That's a huge benefit. Helps hydrate skin after shaving. Simple. It'll do wonders for your skin. DEW, do, to play on the name of the product. So they've integrated their brand voice all the way through. They've also used contractions for an example. It'll do wonders for your skin, not it will. So they're really consistent with that down to earth, like talking to a friend, you would absolutely use contractions. They use humor in it. They're using simplicity. It really conveys their overall brand in a consistent way. The next brand we're going to talk about is Lululemon, which is a fan favorite brand. There are people who are very loyal to Lululemon, and it's a Canadian and Vancouver based brand. So my perception is that athletic people in Vancouver, especially people who are into yoga, are definitely wearing Lululemon. And its voice is really marked by the fact that it's complimenting their people. It's very, very complimentary. It tells them what they look good in, what they deserve. It's very positive overall. So my junior content writer actually pulled a sentence from one of their recent email campaigns that well demonstrates their brand voice. What will you do in the right bra? It's very empowering, right? It's tying the fact that this empowering experience is connected to their amazing bra that they're selling in the email campaign, but it really shows that brand voice. It evokes feelings of aspiration, and a lot of their voice also creates a feeling of belonging, like you're part of the fan club, you're part of the Lululemon community. And this makes sense because they're encouraging people to achieve their health-related goals. And the healthier someone feels while they're wearing Lululemon, the more satisfied they're going to be overall with that purchasing experience, because it's helping them to live out that aspirational version of themselves that they're really buying into when they buy a Lululemon product. All right, the third and final business we're going to look at in terms of their brand voice is Uber. For better or worse, they have a very consistent brand voice. And in and of itself, it's about consistency. Their brand is bold. They make bold claims. They are considerate. Very often they focus very much on the client experience. I'm sure on the driver's side, they have some "we support you" kind of language, but it's very obvious when you're in the app that it's very customer-oriented language. And they also have the customer service to back that up. For example, I had a not great day with Uber a couple weeks ago where I had problems with two drivers on the same day. It was super strange, where one of them just kept delaying over and over and over again. So they were supposed to get there in 10 minutes, ended up being 15 minutes, then 20 minutes, and beyond that to the point where I had to cancel because I wasn't going to get where I needed to go on time. And all I had to do was fill out a couple of steps in the app, and I immediately got a refund. No one had to review it. It was super, super easy. Something similar happened that night where I had a driver say that they showed up. I was at the spot. They clearly weren't there. I tried to contact them, and instead of chatting with me, because I could see they were like a block away and I could have helped them get where the actual meeting point was, they just canceled and they didn't show up. So I was able to follow those steps again. It was the weirdest day, and I was able to get a refund. So they actually have the customer service to back up their promise of being customer-centric, consistent, and bold, at least in my experience. And I think that's a really important point to keep in mind as well. Your brand voice needs to be congruent to the experience of the brand that your customers are going to have. Their language is also very simple, very direct, and it speaks to the you singular in their audience, because oftentimes an app user is a single person. So it makes a lot of sense that instead of saying y'all, you guys, they're actually speaking to just one you. That conversational tone, that direct tone, instills trust the way that you would speak to a friend in a messaging app. So it's very consistent that way overall, and also very consistent with the brand image they're trying to create. They want their audience to trust them because it could be risky getting into a stranger's car. And they've worked really hard in other aspects of their business to create a sense of trust. Being able to share your routes with other people, for example, knowing what your driver is supposed to look like and their license plate before you get in. So it makes sense that in their voice as well, they're trying to convey that trust on a subconscious level. So here's some copy as an example. Our commitment to safety. We want you to move freely, make the most of your time, and be connected to the people and places that matter most to you. That's why we're committed to safety. From the creation of new standards to the development of technology with the aim of reducing incidents. So, very direct, this is what we want for you. We want you to move freely, we want you to make the most of your time, very direct, very benefits focused as well, which is great. That's why that's a lot of contractions, just like a friend would type. The one place I feel like it sort of strays a bit is when they switch to the development of technology with the aim of reducing incidents. That's not the simplest language, and they usually use simpler language than that, but I think it's because it's a sensitive topic. And the less simple it is, the easier it is to sound very advanced. It's also easier to potentially hide behind things. Calling something an incident makes it also feel very distant. They're not saying we are contributing to an incident. It's very passive, it's very distant. So I think that's why they've strayed from their brand voice a little bit, because it's a more sensitive subject. But overall, most of the text was very consistent with their brand voice. And maybe the average consumer wouldn't notice when it strays to that degree, because it was small. As a copywriter, I'm going to notice tiny things like that. But if they did that too often, they started to speak kind of robotically like that, it would come across very strange, and it would start to have an impact on the end customer's experience of the brand. All right, so there are additional layers that go into creating a very unique brand voice, especially if you're in a very saturated market or you want to stand out online because people from all over the world could potentially compete for your target audience. And those layers are something you can learn more about by reading about our brand messaging Bible, because it explains everything that's included in there, and those are all the processes we go through to create a distinct brand voice. It includes all of what we talked about in today's video, but also things like brand archetypes and your ideal customer's level of awareness, for example. So I would highly recommend checking that out so you understand how far in depth you can go, and also decide, is this the right thing for you and your brand? Does it need a distinct brand voice that is focused on results first? Because that's obviously, as our business, that's our focus for you. So you can check that out in the link in the YouTube description or in the podcast show notes, the link directly to the Brand Messaging Bible by Emma Gibbons Content and Copy. So what aspect of brand voice surprised you? Have you ever thought about cadence before? That rhythm and pace in your copy? I'd love to know. Let me know in the YouTube comments below. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss a video about copywriting, content marketing, and entrepreneurship. YouTube should now be suggesting some great videos for you to watch. I would definitely recommend that you click on one of those, but otherwise I will see you again next Thursday. Bye!